Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to our Managing Your Salesforce Costs for Data Access webinar. My name is Susan Kudalakis, and I'm Marketing Manager here at Progress. Let's start by quickly introducing today's speakers. I'm joined by Todd Wright. Todd leads global product marketing for OpenEdge and Data Direct Solutions from Progress. He works closely with the product management and sales organizations to create and promote materials that are relevant and valuable to Progress customers. He's instrumental in developing customer relationships and creating strategic marketing plans that drive awareness, consideration, education, and demand for Progress. And next up, we have Aaron Berg. He's Senior Solutions Engineer with Progress. He's been with the company for 4 years. He has worked in the IT space for over 20 years, working in network administration and data connectivity. His primary focus is on bridging the gap between data and analytics by using open standards such as ODBC, JDBC, OData, and REST. This broad experience has allowed him to be a valuable resource for customers looking to implement Progress Data Direct Connectivity solutions. And now I'm going to turn it over to Todd and Aaron to jumpstart the presentation.
All right, thanks, Susan, and hello to everyone on the webcast today. To kick things off, let's start with why many of us are here today, and that's because many of us, including here at Progress Data Direct, use Salesforce as our system of choice. And to really highlight how well Salesforce is doing, and in fact, how many people are actually using Salesforce, let's look at some of these figures. Number one, over 21 billion in revenue in 2021 so far. A 19.8% share of the CRM market, more than its 4 leading competitors combined. 150,000 organizations are using Salesforce. And staggering number right here as well, in the last 10 years, compound annual growth is over 29% for Salesforce. So obviously, a lot of us are using it out in the market, and they continue to grow. So with all that said, it goes without saying that there is a wealth of data and insights within Salesforce system. And what organizations really do with that data will really determine their success and failure. What many of us have learned within the last decade or so, that for reporting and analytics and even machine learning initiatives to have any true value, they must be populated with real-time data from relevant data sources. And if not, many of the decisions could rely on opinions or even worse, just guessing from business leaders or executives. So it is without surprise that the leader in data connectivity, Data Direct from Progress, has functionality and supports Salesforce. And this really comes in 2 main areas. First of all, Data Direct enables analytics and reporting against your Salesforce data using your own BI tools instead of Salesforce built-in reporting. This is really possible because many of the popular BI tools that are out there have embedded Salesforce driver to connect to Salesforce. That meaning they have embedded Data Direct within their BI solution. And even the ones that don't, the other 20% or so, our drivers actually have plugins to almost all BI tools for secure and reliable connectivity to Salesforce. And what do both of those mean? Both result in no need to export Salesforce data to a data warehouse, essentially meaning you can, with Data Direct, report against live Salesforce data for real-time information. And anyone that's in the analytics and reporting space know that real-time information is really where the true value is. So moving on, the second main reason is Data Direct enables you to view external data from within your Salesforce application or Salesforce reports. And this is essentially done by the fact that Data Direct's Salesforce Connect feature uses OData to connect to external data. And the Data Direct also, for Salesforce, can expose any data source as OData. This allows you to view external data from Salesforce without having to relocate and store that data in Salesforce, resulting in a huge cost savings for organizations. And for those that might not be fully familiar with OData, we're going to go a little bit into that and what it's all about within the demo portion. So on the topic, you might have heard the words cost savings, and that's what Data Direct from Progress is really all about. On top of all of the cost savings or all of the functionality that Data Direct provides, it's really the cost savings as well that's truly a benefit to you and your organizations. And the cost savings are really found in three main ways. As mentioned in the previous slide, Data Direct saves orgs money on the relocating and saving of data, thus reducing the really expensive storage costs within Salesforce that can really add up. But also, Data Direct provides a tremendous savings on monthly licensing costs against many native connections that you'll see out in the market. So I will say with a caveat, this is of course dependent on each individual need and situation that we have with the organization. So it definitely makes sense to be in contact with your Progress Data Direct rep to learn more as you engage more with our company. And finally, data source groupings. Data Direct allows you to perform data source groupings, which can reduce the number of Salesforce Connect licenses that you need. The fewer that you have, of course, the less that you'll be paying on a monthly basis. And while still allowing you to access multiple data sources, that is common in the market today. So really, it goes without saying that, and it's no wonder that 80% of all leading BI vendors partner with Data Direct, and hundreds of other orgs have partnered with us for data connection requirements. A real standout example of this is a leading cloud provider that has a customer that was in need of real-time data connections to Salesforce. As most of us know, ETL is not really a viable option all the time, and creating a custom connection was out of the question for this organization, both from a cost and time perspective. So from that, this cloud provider turned to Data Direct for their needs. Thankfully for this organization, and I'm happy to say as well, within minutes of use, the cloud provider was able to create an OData-based REST API connection to Salesforce, as opposed to possibly taking months. And the end result, as you can imagine, they save hundreds of hours on labor by not having to pull IT resources off critical projects to create a custom connection, which no organization really wants to do. And even more important, their client remains loyal because the requirements were met for real-time data connections to Salesforce. And this is just one example of many regarding how Data Direct is helping organizations succeed. And to show you how we are doing all this, I'd like to turn it over to Aaron now to show you a bit about what Data Direct is all about. Aaron?
All right, well, thank you, Todd, for going through how we can help companies save with their Salesforce expenses. For the demo part of this, I want to go through how we can help expose those on-prem external data sources to Salesforce using the Salesforce Connect feature. Now, what Salesforce Connect does is it allows you to take those sources and view them where they live. So you don't actually have to copy those data sources into Salesforce. You actually are accessing them as the single source of truth. And it does this through what I like kind of call the magic of OData. OData being a REST API, I like to call it SQL over REST. Microsoft started this about 15 years ago. And you'll see it in a lot of BI tools. It's become a very common way to connect to data over the REST protocol. It makes it really easy to integrate when you're talking with Salesforce. Now, the nice thing in Salesforce is you can create these external objects. So normally you'll have standard objects out of the box, custom objects that you can build in Salesforce, those also being objects that are using data that's stored in Salesforce. Now, when you come to these external objects, they're actually just storing the metadata or of the remote data sources. So here on the right, you'll see like the orders, invoices, benefits, those are all reaching out to data sources that might be hosted in the cloud or on-prem. So for the demo here, I'm going to do a real quick architecture overview of the environment that I'm using. And then I will also then show how we're going to connect to an on-prem SQL server. We're going to OData enable that. And then we're going to connect to that endpoint from Salesforce. And then inside of Salesforce, I'm going to show you how we can view and update that because this is a full CRUD solution. And then we'll go back over to Todd and pick it up for questions. So from an architecture point of view, what I'm doing here is we have our hybrid data pipeline servers running in AWS. And those are able to connect out to data sources, whether either directly or in the cloud, or even remote. And it does that using this on-premises connector. And this is a small Windows agent that runs where it has network access to the data, uses outbound SSL to connect back to the hybrid data pipeline, and gives you that secure access without having to set up a VPN or SSH tunnel. And then finally, we're going to come over here and consume that data in Salesforce using the OData REST API. So to start, over here on where I have my SQL Server, you'll see I have SQL Server running here, and then I've installed that hybrid data pipeline on-premises connector, just that simple Windows agent. And it's reaching out to the hybrid data pipeline server. We can do a test connect on that, validate its connectivity. So it makes it very easy to do that integration. When we go to the hybrid data pipeline server now, and we're going to log into that, all right, we're going to create a new data source in the hybrid data pipeline. We'll be connecting to a SQL server, the one that we installed the on-premises connector to access. We're going to name our data source, put in the credentials to access it, as well as the name of the database. We're going to put in the connector ID, and then click Test Connect. Once we have successfully connected, we can now go to the OData tab, and here we'll use OData version 4 to set up the schema mapping to associate the on-prem data source or as an OData endpoint. We're going to choose our albums. We'll add that to our map. We'll choose the artist table as well and add that to the map. And then we're going to click Save Map and save one more time. And you'll see here that it's going to build out that schema mapping. Once that's completed, we're going to end up with the OData endpoint, which you see here. So we're going to take that OData endpoint, and now we're going to go over to Salesforce, where we're going to connect to that data source. So we're going to go into Setup inside of Salesforce. We'll choose our external data, external data sources. We'll click New External Data Source, and here we're going to name it. We're going to choose OData v4. We will put in the URL that we just created through the hybrid data pipeline. We're going to make this a writable object. And then we'll change our authentication and set our credentials. And we will click Save. Once that's done, we'll click Validate and Sync. We'll choose the two tables, and this was what maps those to the external objects inside of Salesforce. You'll see that those have been mapped. And once that's done, we can now create a tab. I find this a good way to view these. So if we go to Tabs, and we'll create a new custom object tab. We're going to choose our object here. In this case, we're going to choose Artists. We're going to choose our tab style. And we'll click Next. And then Next. And then Save. Once the tab has been created, we can now go back to one of the apps in Salesforce and view that tab. You'll see the Artist tab here on the top. I'm going to change our view to all. And then we're going to also modify the fields that we can see. So I'm going to add the artist ID and the name field. And then we're going to move those up a little bit. And we'll move the artist ID up as well. We'll click Save. And now you'll see this live data coming back from that on-premise database. Now, one cool thing we can do, and you'll actually see the URL here pointing to it, is we can actually create a new record here to show that we have full write capabilities. And to use my stage name here, we'll save that. Now we've created Artist 300. If we go back to our SQL server and run a query, you'll see that we've already written that back. So as you can see, it's really a quick way to expose that on-prem data source to Salesforce, be able to use it inside of Salesforce, and save you a lot of time and cost in terms of having to move data into Salesforce. So with that, I think I'll hand it back over to Todd for questions.
Hey, thanks, Aaron. Looks like we saved about 10 minutes for questions. So let's just jump right into them. And the first question that we had, Aaron, it was mentioned that most BI providers have Data Direct embedded within their platform. Should I contact them about additional connectors needed or Data Direct? I'd love to take this one. My answer to this one would be you can contact either. If your BI provider, as we had mentioned, majority of BI providers out there have Data Direct embedded with them, you can contact them and see if there's any particular driver that they can support. If they don't support that particular driver from Data Direct, feel free to call us directly and we'll be able to help you out regardless of the BI vendor that you're using. Aaron, anything to add on that one or pretty much covered?
No, I think that's definitely good, and that's specifically around looking for connectivity from these BI tools to Salesforce.
Yep, exactly. This is a good question for you, Aaron. There were mentions in the demo about Salesforce connectors and a hybrid data pipeline. Can you explain again the difference between the two?
Sure. So there are really two ways that we support Salesforce. One is with our ODBC or JDBC Salesforce connectors, which would run in, say, like a BI tool or any other tool that supports those standards and lets you access data that's already in Salesforce, gives you a relational view to that data. And then using the Salesforce Connect and our OData capabilities, that actually lets you go the opposite direction and consume external data into Salesforce. So can really support your connectivity in either direction. And actually even within, to add one more thing to it, you can actually even use the hybrid data pipeline to connect to Salesforce and expose Salesforce out through that tool as well. So that works bi-directionally also. So a lot of flexibility there, just depending on what you're trying to accomplish.
Okay, excellent, thanks. We have another question. This one is about getting the Data Direct drivers installed and up and going. How long does it take, from our experience, to really get a Salesforce driver up and running for an organization?
So the Salesforce driver, like the ODBC or JDBC drivers, are just a very simple installation, and then creating like that DSN or your JDBC URL to appropriately inside of it. So that's something that you're probably up and running with in a matter of minutes to an hour, just to get that connectivity. Now, in terms of getting hybrid data pipeline running, that would be something you would install in your own environment in the cloud, requires a Linux machine, or we actually can support high availability, fault tolerance there. So, or multiple machines sitting behind a load balancer. So once you have that infrastructure in place, again, it's a very simple installation of hybrid data pipeline on those machines. And you're looking at, hours to a day to get, at least a simple configuration running. So it's pretty quick to get going.
Okay, great. We have one other question. This one is about a trial. If I am doing a trial of Data Direct connectivity driver, at the end of the trial, how would I go about licensing from that trial?
So you would, working with your account executive here at Progress, they would support you through that. And basically it's as simple as applying a license key once you've purchased it.
Okay.
Todd, I'm going to jump in because there are some additional questions. So there's a couple about Progress databases and a couple about records exposed at the REST endpoints. So I'll start with a couple of those. So how many records are exposed at the REST endpoint, and how is pagination handled for that? And I think that's more of a question for Aaron.
Sure. Yeah. So we basically expose the entire data source, and we do the pagination basically on our own. We paginate on the hybrid data pipe to the OData endpoint, I guess, as it's requested. So we try and stay a little bit ahead of that, and there's some configuration that can adjust that depending on what your requirements are. But we have people that use this for millions and millions of rows of data all the time, and it's become it's quite efficient to do that, since we can try and push down as much to the database and then paginate as required to bring that data back efficiently.
So another question I think for you, Aaron, is does the data connector service support any high availability or load balancing configurations? The service
It does.
itself, not the data
Yeah.
sources.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. It's kind of one of my favorite features of the product is we can support and basically as many hybrid data pipeline nodes as you want set up in a cluster environment. Those would use a shared backend database, bring in a database of your choosing, as well as some shared storage. And then on the front end, you put a load balancer like Amazon ALB or Nginx or whatever your load balancer of choice is to handle the traffic going to those. We do support WebSockets as well as HTTP tunneling protocols for the load balancer, so very easy to use with the modern cloud load balancers. And that will give you that high availability and load balancing.
Okay, there's one more I can see is, can this be used to write back into a Progress database? For example, changing values in Salesforce that are mapped to a Progress database and be able to update that information.
Hybrid Data Pipeline does connect to the OpenEdge or Progress database, and it is a full CRUD solution. So you could, inside of Salesforce, just like we did in the demo, modify something, and it would be updated directly into the OpenEdge database. So we would just treat it as just one of our standard data sources that's available. I think hopefully that answers your question. If not, definitely reach out and we can dig into a little bit more detail.
I was just about to say that. I hope that answers the question. I say Progress database.
We've done this once or twice, Susan.
I know. So I think that's all the questions that we have. I hope that we addressed everything that everyone asked, but feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. And from all of us here at Progress, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Susan. And thank you to everyone that joined.
Thank you.
Thank you.